welcome back to another video. I hope you've been keeping very well. I am really excited to get into this video and to be sharing it. It's one I've been looking forward to creating for a while, and in this video I'm going to share with you 10 different ways that I really love to cook tofu. If you've been around my channel for a while, you may already know this, but when I first went vegan around 10 years ago, I did not like tofu at all, and I've really learned to love it over the years. Now it is such a staple in my diet, and I've really learned so many different ways to cook it. So I think of this as a video that's kind of like a guide to cooking tofu for beginners with 10 different delicious ideas and ways that you can try it out at home. In this video, I'm mainly going to be using a classic firm tofu that you can get from the supermarkets here in Australia, and I'll also use a little bit of silken tofu that you can also get from the supermarkets here in Australia. Anyway, with all that being said, let's get into the food because we've got a lot to get through in this video, and let's start with recipe number one. So this is my BLAT, or BLAT if you would prefer to call it that, and this is a recipe that I continuously go back to. It's one of my favorite ways to enjoy tofu. I start by slicing some firm tofu using a slicer so that it's in these really nice thin pieces, and then into a bowl I add some olive oil, soy sauce, barbecue sauce, some sriracha, as well as some liquid smoke. And then I'm mixing this all together until it's nice and well combined. I'm then adding all of those pieces of tofu into the mixture and tossing with my hands to coat them really well. And you want to make sure that pretty much every bit of tofu is well coated. Then I transfer this onto a baking tray, and I'm going to put this into the oven to bake. Whilst it's baking, I prep the rest of the ingredients. So I've got some tomato as well as some lettuce. The tomato I'm going to thinly slice, the lettuce I'm going to roughly chop, and then I also get into some avocado because we're making a BLAT. So tofu, bacon, lettuce, avocado, tomato. And what I love about cooking tofu like this in particular is that it's really versatile. The flavorings are really good, and they're a great addition to lots of different meals. So definitely one to keep in mind. You don't necessarily have to have it on a sandwich. You can have it in many other ways. But when it comes to the sandwich, I load on the avocado, the lettuce, the tomato. Then of course I add on a whole heap of that tofu, that nice crispy smoky tofu. And then on to the other piece of bread, I put some mayonnaise, and then I put this on top, and we've got a gorgeous sandwich. Honestly, I feel like I could eat this sandwich every day. I genuinely never ever get sick of it. So for this air-fried buffalo tofu, we're going to start by cutting some firm tofu into rectangles, and then once I've cut all of this up, I am going to transfer them into a bowl. Now, you may see me use this method frequently on my YouTube channel, and that is because I love it so much. I soak the tofu in some boiling water with some chicken stock powder so that it can really soak up all of that flavor. Then into a food processor, I add in some panko breadcrumbs as well as some nutritional yeast, some plain flour. I'm also adding in some veggie stock powder as well as some garlic powder. And then I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm going to blitz this together into a nice fine crumb. If you're wanting to eat gluten-free, you can sub for gluten-free flour, gluten-free breadcrumbs, or you can also use corn flour here if you would like to. So I transfer this onto a plate, and then I am going to dip and coat all of those pieces of tofu until they're breaded nice and well. Now, I like to air fry this for what I believe to be the best texture, but you can do this in the oven if you would prefer to. I start with a little bit of oil and the crispy tofu, well, soon to be crispy tofu, that I put into the air fryer to crisp up for about 15 to 18 minutes. Now, whilst that's in there, we're going to make a sauce that's really simple. I just use some sriracha. You could just use a store-bought buffalo sauce if you would prefer, as well as some vegan butter, and I whisk this together until it's nice and well combined. And then once that tofu has crisped up lightly in the air fryer, I'm going to dip and coat all of those pieces in this sauce, and then I'm transferring them back into the air fryer. Then we're going to put the air fryer on. We're going to crisp these up for a further 10 minutes, and we end up with these gorgeous crispy pieces of buffalo tofu. They're such a good entertaining dish if you're having friends over and you want to have a fun starter. I love making these. You can have them on wraps or sandwiches in many different ways. They're super versatile, and yeah, I love having them with a little bit of mayo and some fresh herbs for a little bit of freshness and creaminess, and they are just super delicious. A quick break to say a big thank you to my friends at Squarespace for kindly sponsoring this video. If you've never heard of Squarespace before, it's the all-in-one platform to be able to grow and market your business. I use Squarespace for many different things, including my website as well as my monthly newsletter that I send out. It's honestly such a versatile and user-friendly platform, which is why I have kept going back to Squarespace year after year. Whether you're looking to share blog posts or sell products and services, or maybe you're someone who just wants to have a space that showcases everything that you do in your business in one place, creating a website with Squarespace is not only super easy to do, but super beneficial for your business. You can head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you can go to squarespace.com/Amanda Ducks, and you can use my code, which is Amanda Ducks. It will get you 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. This next method of cooking tofu I do quite a lot, and it's the perfect topping for a salad or a pasta if you're just wanting to add some plant-based protein. So I crumble some tofu into a bowl, and then I drizzle with some olive oil, some soy sauce, as well as some barbecue sauce and some liquid smoke. As you can see, I definitely like these smoky barbecue kind of flavors, but you can season tofu like this in different ways depending on the cuisine that you're making or what flavors you prefer. So I spread all of this out onto a baking tray and I put it into the oven to crisp up. Meanwhile, I make a pasta sauce. I really like a simple creamy pasta, and these are really go-tos for me on nights when I can't be bothered cooking. I start by frying up some onion and some garlic in some vegan butter, and then I add in some plant-based cream, continuing to mix this whilst I add some nutritional yeast and some veggie stock powder. And that is a really simple pasta sauce, but it's super effective and delicious, and we don't need it to be completely packed full of flavor and umami because the tofu is going to add so much flavor to the pasta as well. So I cook up some rigatoni, and then when it comes to serving this up, I toss through all of that cooked rigatoni with the pasta sauce, and then I very simply sprinkle this crumbled tofu on top. I like to once again add a little bit of fresh herbs for a pop of color and also just a little bit of freshness, and this is a really simple and delicious way to cook tofu, like I said, adding some protein to a meal that typically wouldn't have a high amount of plant-based protein. Now for this recipe, I want you to think about that air-fried buffalo tofu that we made, because we're using the same breadcrumb mixture for it. But instead, into a bowl, we're adding some miso paste, some vegan chicken stock powder, and some boiling water, whisking it together, and then adding in a couple of pieces of thinly sliced tofu. I'm also making a sauce, which is some vegan mayonnaise with some lemon juice, and then I'm also adding in some fresh dill, and I'm mixing that together until we get a nice fresh sauce that is going to go on our burger. Meanwhile, I'm also slicing up some cucumber, which is of course also going to go on the burger, as well as some cos lettuce, which I roughly chop into pieces. So now we're back to this breadcrumb mixture that we had used for the buffalo tofu, and I like making this breadcrumb mixture in advance and just storing it in my pantry so that I can make crispy tofu really quickly and really easily. So once these were breaded with the breadcrumb mixture, I'm frying them in some oil. Once again, you can use less oil here if you'd like. You can air fry, you can bake, whatever you would prefer. It will change the texture a little bit. I mix it up with what I like to do. And then it's time to assemble the burger. So I'm starting with some of that creamy lemon mayo. Then I'm adding on the cos lettuce, followed by the 2 bits of crispy tofu, a whole heap of sliced cucumber, some more sauce, and then of course the lid of the burger bun. And this was absolutely delicious. if you didn't already know, a great way to ensure tofu soaks up lots of flavor is to tear it into chunks like so. It just means that the sauces that you use and things like that are really going to get into all of those divots, and that is why I and a lot of people tend to cook tofu this way. So into the bowl, I tear the tofu, I add some corn flour and some vegan chicken stock powder, toss it together well, and then I'm adding it into a frying pan with a little bit of oil. The corn flour helps the tofu crisp up so well, and it's such a great thing to be using when you're cooking with tofu. I leave that to fry, and then I'm making the sauce in a bowl. So I'm using the zest of an orange, and then I'm also adding in the juice of said orange. I'm also going to add in some soy sauce, some rice wine vinegar, a little bit of sesame oil, and a little bit of maple syrup, as well as some garlic powder, and I'm whisking that together until it's nice and well combined. And whilst that's happening, the tofu is still frying up in the background, and I'm getting into preparing my veggies. So I'm using some sugar snap peas as well as some broccoli here because they're my favorites, but as always, I encourage you to use veggies that you genuinely enjoy. So the tofu is getting nice and crispy at this point. I've continued frying it up and tossing it, and then it's time to add in that sticky orange sauce. So I'm adding that in, I'm mixing it together well on a low to medium heat, allowing the tofu to soak up that flavor, and then I put it to the side whilst I focus on these greens. I just like to blanch my greens in some boiling water for just a few minutes so they're still lightly crispy but also lightly cooked. That's personally how I like them, so that is what I do. And then when it comes to serving this, I have some fluffy white rice followed by those blanched greens, and then I'm adding in that gorgeous sticky orange tofu, which of course you can use this sticky orange tofu in other things if you would like to. I top with some sesame seeds and some dried shallots, and I have a delicious lunch that is super nourishing and super delicious. Now, I couldn't get through a tofu video without making my favorite tofu dessert, and I know it might sound weird. It sounded weird to me before I tried it, and now it's one of my staple desserts. Into a food processor, I add some silken tofu, some yogurt, some maple syrup, some cacao powder, some melted dark chocolate, some vanilla, and some salt. And then I'm going to blitz this together until it is really nice and smooth. This tofu you think you would be able to taste. Personally, I don't think that you can, and it is a high protein and delicious decadent dessert. I used to love chocolate mousse before I became vegan, and I love my chocolate tofu mousse now. This is one of the best ways to make it, and as you can see, the texture for this tofu mousse is gorgeous. It only needs to set in the fridge for a few hours, and it is super creamy. I love having this as a little dessert with some fresh berries on the side, whether it be my afternoon sweet treat or a lovely dessert after dinner. It's so delicious, and I definitely recommend giving it a go. And not to repeat myself, but there's no way I could get through a tofu for beginners video without sharing this tofu scramble, because making tofu scramble this way is what made me love tofu. So if you don't love tofu and you haven't loved tofu scramble, you need to try this one. Into a frying pan, I add some vegan butter, and then I'm adding in some diced brown onion and frying that up for a few minutes. Then I'm going to add in some firm tofu, which I'm going to crumble with my hands. I also like to add in a little bit of silken tofu here as well, so it's a nice mixture of the two. Then I also add in some soy milk, some veggie stock, some nutritional yeast, as well as some Dijon mustard. I mix this together, and if you want an extra yellow flavor, you can add in some turmeric. You can also add in some black salt if you want that eggy flavor. Personally, I don't, but if you do miss the flavor of eggs, that's definitely something that you can do. So I like serving a whole heap of this scramble on a piece of sourdough for breakfast. It's super hearty and delicious, and this is also one that you can meal prep in advance and just heat up day to day. So next up, I wanted to share with you how I make this tofu and cashew cannelloni. It's one of my favorites, and I start by dicing some brown onion, and then into a pan I add some olive oil, add that brown onion, and begin frying it up. I also then add in some dried Italian herbs as well as some garlic powder, and I'm going to continue frying this up before I add in some tomato paste as well as some tinned tomatoes, a little bit of water. I'm then also adding in some passata before I add in some veggie stock powder as well as some raw sugar. Mix this all together, and then I'm going to leave this to simmer whilst we move on to what we're doing with the tofu. So into a separate frying pan, I'm adding a little bit of oil as well as the rest of that diced brown onion. After it's fried up for a few minutes, I'm also adding in some frozen spinach, combining this well and frying it up until the spinach has defrosted. Then into a food processor, I am adding in some firm tofu. I'm also adding in some raw cashews, which I've soaked in some boiling water for about an hour so they've softened nicely. I'm also adding in some water, some veggie stock powder, some garlic powder, as well as some nutritional yeast, some white miso paste, as well as some Dijon mustard. I put the lid on, and then I'm going to blitz this together until we get a nice tofu cashew ricotta, because we're making a spinach and ricotta cannelloni. So once this is blended together well, I then add in that spinach and onion mixture, put the lid on, and I just pulse this a few times to get that spinach mixed through, but you don't want it to fully blend through, if that makes sense. Then into my pan, which this is a pan that can also go into the oven, just an FYI. If you don't have one of these, you will need to transfer into something that can go in the oven. I put the tofu ricotta mixture into these cannelloni tubes, place them into the sauce. I'm going to try and get that sauce nice and evenly distributed over some of the cannelloni, sprinkle with some vegan cheese, and then put this into the oven to bake. Once it's all done, it should look gorgeous and golden and crispy and so hearty. I sprinkle with some fresh parsley as well as a little bit of olive oil, and this is such a great one to make when you're entertaining. It's a great one to meal prep. It's so hearty, it's so delicious. I definitely recommend. I recommend trying all the recipes in this one, but this one in particular, it's so good. These peanut tofu skewers are one of my favorite things that I've ever made, and that feels dramatic based on me thinking that so many of other things that I've made in this video are some of the best things that I've ever made, but this is what I love about tofu. It's so versatile, it carries so much flavor. So into a bowl, I add some cubed tofu with some veggie stock powder and some corn flour. Once again, you'll see the repetition with the corn flour. I use it a lot when I'm cooking tofu. And then I'm going to put these all onto some skewers nice and evenly, and once they are all nice and well done, we're moving over to the frying pan. So I'm drizzling with some oil and I'm adding these tofu skewers in there, frying them up until they are nice and golden on each side. You'll need to flip and rotate them. Then into a bowl, I add some smooth peanut butter. I also add some soy sauce, some rice wine vinegar, and some sesame oil, as well as some garlic and some water. And then I'm going to whisk this together until it is a nice, smooth, pourable sauce. You don't want it to be too thick, so definitely keep that in mind. After frying up the tofu for a little bit longer, I then drizzle over the peanut sauce, making sure to leave a little bit on the side for when we serve. I'm then reducing the heat to low and frying these up for a few minutes before serving them on a plate, drizzling with a little bit of the extra peanut sauce, topping with some fresh spring onions, some chili, and some sesame seeds. And once again, these are perfect for entertaining, but also perfect to enjoy for yourself. For this next recipe, I am starting by cutting off a small amount of tofu from my block, and then I'm getting into grating this tofu. This is a method that you might have seen online before, and it is super versatile and super delicious. I set that to the side whilst I cut up some red onion. I'm finely dicing this because we're going to be mixing it in with that grated tofu, as well as some fresh dill, which once again I am chopping nice and finely. Then into a bowl I am adding some vegan mayonnaise, some Dijon mustard, some water and some salt, and I am mixing this together until it is nice and well combined. I'm then adding in that grated tofu followed by the red onion and the dill, and I'm mixing this together until it's nice and well combined and everything's nice and well coated. Then I'm getting into slicing the veggies for this sandwich. So I decided to use some cucumber, some tomato and some lettuce, but of course with this I always recommend using the ingredients that you enjoy and making something that you love. So if these aren't your favorite things to put on sandwiches, put something else on the sandwich, you know? Anyway, I get a piece of bread, put some vegan butter, add that lettuce, add that shredded tofu mixture, add the cucumber, add the tomato. Of course, on the tomato we need to add some cracked black pepper and then put that lid on that sandwich. Now, to ensure that this didn't spill everywhere when I'm going to eat it, I wrap it in some baking paper and then slice it in half. It makes it much more enjoyable and less messy to eat, and of course, super delicious. And that brings us to the end of these 10 delicious tofu recipes. I hope that you enjoyed and got at least one new idea to try out at home. All of the details of these recipes are down in the description box, and if you do try them out, make sure to let me know. My goal is to continue this series and showcase another ingredient that I love eating on a vegan diet in the next one in this series. So if you have any requests for an ingredient that you'd like to see, please let me know. At the moment, the front runner is tempeh for the next video, which I love tempeh so much. As always, a big thank you for being here, supporting me and my channel. I appreciate it and you so very much. And I will see you next week in another video. Bye.